Welcome to our greatest American art form.
The mixtape.
Now, for all of you kids who don't know,
Traditionally, a mixtape is a homemade compilation of media from multiple sources, recorded into a medium like a CD, a VHS, or cassette tape.
what we are presenting to you here is something we call Mixtape Therapy,
A collection of authentic conversations,
often wacky conversations,
inspired by what inspires us.
except instead of a cassette tape, we are bringing you a podcast
So just as you might share a mixtape, we share these conversations with you.
in the hopes that they spark a similar connection to the good old mixtape. Now, join us
for a little
for some
mixtape.
mixtape.
I try and remember this song. I love this song very much. There's a couple songs I love so much I don't want to play them because they have this cosmic spiritual average in the world, and you don't want to bring it down by messing it up one night. This is a very delicate song. Oh my God! I go like this. Wild grace, desperately in his old place, dreaming to discover a new space, and bury himself alive.
Today, Scottie's going to take it away with his John Mayer song. Scottie, talk to us about this song.
So I'm a huge John Mayer person. I love John Mayer. I love his writing. I love his music and stuff like that. And this is a really obscure song on this album. It's a really obscure song in general. I don't think it's a very, people don't listen to John Mayer and actually search after this song. But the song, just at the time where I heard it and the way it hit me, it was so unique and interesting for what was going on in my life. And then just kind of, I don't want to say kind of sculpting it to my thoughts of what was going on in my life. It was kind of similarly taking a similar path, and just the irony of it. And so I told Hannah kind of before we started recording that I was going to do something different. I was going to actually hand it back to her. Usually, we'll do a thing where we hand it off. Oh, by the way, that's Hannah. I'm Scottie. I'm a coach. Hannah's a therapist. We might have missed that part, but anyway, so so that's what we do. And so usually what we do is I will tell my thoughts on it, and then I kick it to Hannah. But I'm really, because I've listened to the song so many times and I've heard it and been through it so many times, I'm really curious to see what Hannah's experience is and see if it's anywhere close to what my ideas are. So Hannah, take it away.
I will take it away. So I know a little bit of John Mayer. I know some John Mayer songs. I think of him, and Scottie, you might need to educate me. I think of John Mayer as being excuse the crudeness of this, but like a panty dropper for Gen X women.
I would think that's
Gen
fair.
X women and like older millennial women. I should say older millennial women, actually, just love them some John Mayer. I remember listening to Your Body is a Wonderland when I was 10 and being like, this is so dirty.
Yeah.
So I don't know. John Mayer holds a place in my brain of, let's just say, a person who would not write a song like this. I think this song is really unique. And I think that the genre that we would put this song in is a ballad, if I'm remembering correctly, as in it's a song that tells a story about someone who is not the singer, right?
Yeah.
It's a story about someone else. I did go down a little bit of a Reddit rabbit hole that I told Scottie about. I'll get to that in a second. Okay. So I was listening to this song and it seemed very un-John Mayer-like because it's telling this story about a man who supposedly in the 60s, I think is... You tell us the title of the song, Scottie.
So the actual title of the song is Walter Gray's Submarine Test, January 1967. That's the actual title of the song.
Yes, which makes it really seem like this is a true story. I'm like, oh my God, Walter Gray's and a submarine test in 67. As I'm listening to this song, I'm just getting very sucked into this story. Candidly, I'm going to be candid. I'm thinking about my dad because my dad is a really odd person who might just do something like this, which is to make a handmade submarine and test it out to see if it works. And as I'm listening to this song, I'm just feeling more and more afraid. Like, why is he making a handmade submarine? I'm terrified. This isn't going to end well. And he has a wife and he has kids. Everyone's calling him crazy. I know my perspective is going to be different from Scottie's, but I'm just terrified. I'm kind of mad at Walter. I'm like, Walter, what are you doing? You're risking your life with a handmade submarine. And then the first time I listened to the song, there's a part that's saying, like, it's been 4 weeks. His wife has been waiting for the call. And I was convinced that Walter had, in fact, died in his handmade submarine. And so I was just like very upset, honestly. So immediately following the song, I looked it up. I'm like, Walter Grace, who is this person? And like, I can't believe someone actually did this. Turns out it is a fictional character. Spoiler alert. I do recommend, I mean, I feel bad spoiling that because I did go down like an emotional tour de force as I was reckoning with this song. He's not a real person. And then I re-listened to the song and looked at the lyrics, and I think Walter survives. I think he makes it to Tokyo.
You do?
I think that's what it is. I think he makes it. But I was struck between the beauty of the message and the message being, do something crazy, follow your very weird and obscure dreams, just because you want to. So I was caught between the beauty of that and then the very visceral fear of men, I'm going to just say it, Scottie, men doing dangerous things. And doing dangerous things, which sometimes leads to great discoveries and sometimes just leads to them dying and leaving their wife and children behind. So I had a lot of feelings. I had a lot of feelings about Walter Grace and his choices.
So,
also repping. Look at this.
Repping. Yeah, I like that. So yes, my interpretation is totally different.
Yes.
My interpretation of the song is that he's planning his suicide. That's my interpretation of the song. And so,
okay, that makes sense.
Because to give background and and this is what's so great about what we're doing is that there's so it's just such a, I say that the song is about suicide and Hannah's like, holy shit, like, what are you talking about? And that's how music hits us, and that's how mixed media is, right? And so in the song, he's talking about he's burying himself in his basement, he's building this submarine, and he's going to go to Tokyo, right? And metaphorically in my mind, it felt like in moments where I have felt like there's no future for me. Like that I might as well go ahead and plan how I'm going to kill myself because no one understands me. I can't make it in this world anymore. Once it's done with me, I think it says, once you're done with this world, the rest is up to you. It was more of, I looked at it as that he's planning this thing in this basement and he's not talking to his wife and he's making this trip to Tokyo. And then everyone has all these great things to say about him after he's gone, which is to me, the funeral and the death and then how they saw him, really saw him. And so, it's weird that when I found the song, I was in a very depressed state. I was in a very bad state. And it made me think about that process of what it would, oh man, I get emotional thinking about it. What it would be like to remove myself from this planet. And then what would people say about me when I'm gone? And what would they think about me? And would they say I was crazy? What all would they do? And when and it spoke to me in a way which is really rewarding in the sense of, after I went through all those emotions, I was like, I can't leave these people. I can't leave these people that are important to me. I can't do this thing. I don't want to go to Tokyo, because Tokyo being heaven in my scenario, right? I don't want to make it to Tokyo. I don't want people to talk about what I've done and blah, 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 or whatever. And so it kept me moving. And so, my interpretation was way darker and way, way gross and deeper than the surface level of here's this great, because the first time I heard it, I was like Hannah. I was like, oh, here's a story about this guy that's building this submarine, and people thinks he's crazy, and and he's going to take a trip to Tokyo, and people talk about, I was like, it was very lighthearted. And then the more I listened to it over and over again, either I extrapolate my own feelings to the song, and like that's how I was interpreting it after that point, or maybe that is a secret interpretation of the song. Maybe that's kind of what he meant to kind of like play out majestically in this other story, is the idea of like not wanting to be here anymore and remove yourself, and what that looks like in the process, and then what happens on the other side. I don't know, but it really, it really hit me in that way of like thinking about like suicide, and like that was really crazy, and luckily and thankfully it also brought me to this other side of like, you can't do that. So like that was really good too. So
To be fair, the first time I heard it, I thought it was about death. Right? I
okay,
thought
so
he had died. Like, that was my whole thing, is I was like, well, this must be a real story, and he died. There's no way that if this was a real thing, if someone built, I should look at the camera. If someone built it's just so hard not to look at you.
yeah.
If someone built a handmade submarine in the 60s, like, surely they died. And so then I was interpreting all those lyrics. Yeah, if you're done with this world, the next is up to you. I was 100% thinking this song was about death until I realized it was a fictional character. But Scottie, your interpretation doesn't seem far off. And I think there was a real darkness about this song that I felt. And I was sure that he had died. Because it is, I mean, if this were a real scenario, which it's not, but whatever, let's just say it is. Say someone tried to make a handmade submarine. Yeah, that would be a suicide mission, right? Like that would in fact be a very elegant and what am I trying to say? It would be a very romantic way to go out.
Right.
Like, there's just no way you would actually survive that. I don't know that much about, subnautical engineering, but I know it's dangerous, and I know that the best submarines also fail. So yeah, the initial interpretation is that this is like a really kind of metaphorical song about going out of the world.
I mean, I do think that in the song he dies. Like I think he does die, but I think the way he dies is suicide. It's not like, it's not it's not literally like he got on a handmade submarine. But in my mind, his handmade submarine is the plan. And then
Yeah.
like, and in the song it goes to, let's see. So it says like, they get through the chorus, and he says, that morning the sea was mad. The sea was mad, and I mean it. The waves were as big as he had seen, as deep as his dreams at home. And like that line in there kind of makes me think about the morning in which people probably commit suicide, and what goes through their mind, and how they process that, like leading up to this event that's like, I mean, ever changing, it's going to change your life forever. And the magnitude of that, and like, I felt all that inside those words, especially when I was struggling with wanting to be here, again, that speaks to the power of music, and the greatness of music, the interpretations that me and Hannah have differently, coming to the same conclusion, but in a different process, just explains like my human experience around this piece of music. Hannah's human experience around the movie Twilight. You know what I mean? Like, like that we're interacting with this media and having real emotions and feelings, and I'm processing, even right now, like as I talk about it, that I get kind of emotional. I'm still processing. So processing that feeling of like, because I don't ever feel like that anymore. I don't ever feel so depressed that I just want to kill myself. I don't that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And so to think about that person and look back at that person, and to be here now, and then, there's a lot of sadness, and so I'm feeling a lot of that. You know what I mean?
Do you think your kid has something to do with it?
Meaning what?
Do you think your kid has something to do with the notion that you don't let yourself go there, or that you don't go there anymore, to the, as we would call it, suicidal ideation space of mind?
If it is, it's only because it's happenstance. I think that this mindset and where I was growing to was going to happen anyway. There's another level of, I don't want to be off this planet because someone is counting on me. Like, you know what I mean? And that means a lot. But people commit suicide every day that have children.
Right.
So,
100%.
so it's a factor, but I would say it's it's almost in my subconscious. There's a very conscious effort to make my life the best I can and work hard now for myself and for my daughter and for my family. You know what I mean? At that time I was really low. And I didn't have I didn't have those same ideas and work ethic. Like, there wasn't an idea around, like, I literally, every day I would wake up, I would feel like I'm just going to feel like this forever. And this is never going to end. And I'm going to always be sad. That's the way it felt. And I've said this before, to be on the other side of it, I don't even know what it feels like to feel like that anymore. Like, I can't even allow myself to go back to those feelings because I don't want to feel like that anymore. And everything I do is to not feel like that. So it's hard to kind of relate, other than us talking in this moment and those feelings kind of coming up while I'm talking about it.
You're dipping your toe back into it right now, though, right? I mean, you're letting yourself go there within the confines of a safe space.
I wouldn't be on the verge of being emotional and crying if I wasn't on the edge of that space. Like, it's like being afraid of heights and you fell one time at this one place, and then you go back to that place and you're not falling and you're safe on the edge, but all you think about is I fell. Like, I fell this one time, you know what I mean? So to get back in the mindset of this song and where I was, another song that we did, back in the beginning, to get in this mindset, I think I even told you before we did this, I was like, there's not very many times that I don't listen to a song that I probably don't cry. I have to be in a really good space to listen to it and have a good feeling about it, because it just sucks me right back. Boom. Like, I'm just right back where I was. Like, that emotion is right back. But that's like that because of who I am. That's like that. I'm a lot of music. That's how we got here. That's how we got to doing Mixtape Therapy, is those feelings that I have around media and music and movies. That a connection that I have with that, and how I place myself in these positions. Not the healthiest thing to do, to put myself in the roles of these other people and live through their emotions in a movie that's fictional. But at the same time, it's something I do. I'm aware of it, and I try to make the best balance of it that I can,
I don't know that it's not healthy. I have so many thoughts. Well,
go all therapist. I'm in.
I mean, I'm going to get emotional because my partner and I were talking about this, and I think suicide affects a lot of us. I think most of us, maybe, I don't know. I don't want to make generalizations. I know people who have taken their own life, and it's always the sweetest people. It's always the most sensitive people. And that's something, my partner and I were talking about. It's not like the people who are taking their own life are not like, people have so much anger at them. Understandably, the people who love them feel anger, and I think that's valid. It's obviously a valid feeling, but I also think people who have never experienced depression just have such cruel judgments on suicide, which kind of drives me nuts. But when people talk about suicide, they talk about it as this cowardly thing, or this thing or that thing. Just such harsh judgments. And in my experience, the people I know are the artists. They're the creative people, and the really sensitive people. And so I think, right, Scottie and I are making this podcast because we're both very sensitive people. I don't know that we've named that specifically, but I think it's obvious that we're both very sensitive people who think about feelings and think about life and art and the tenderest parts of existence. And I think those are the people who can relate to the mindset of someone who would want to end it. I think sometimes I make the mistake of thinking oh, my thoughts, everyone thinks about killing themselves, right? Surely everyone has had that moment. And I think more people have than would care to admit it or care to talk about it, because it's obviously like an enormous taboo. I don't know, Scottie, in today's day and age, if we should put like a trigger warning on this episode, probably. But this is such a hot button issue, or, you know, controversial issue to be talking about. But in my experience as a person and as a therapist, suicidal ideation is something a lot of people experience. And there's varying degrees. To get nerdy for a second, we'll step out of the emotional place and just get, you know, scientific about it, or whatever. We talk about SI, suicidal ideation, which just means you have thoughts of killing yourself, and they can be intentional thoughts like, this is the solution to this terrible way I'm feeling, or it can be invasive. Suicidal ideation can just be like, you have this invasive thought about ending your life. Or they also characterize certain things as suicidal ideation of saying, I just want to sleep forever, or I just want to sleep and not wake up. And you're not saying I want to die, but like really just wanting to exit the game board of life. And we would characterize that as suicidal ideation. And that is, it's actually quite common. And I say that, why am I saying that? I'm saying that to validate that I think the feeling of wanting to exit life, I think, is just a human experience. And I'm not saying everyone feels that way. But I think there's a reason why songs about suicide or art about suicide does hit us on the one level, just because it's sad to think about anyone struggling that much and anyone exiting the game board early. But I also think it's because it's easy to put yourself in that position. Like, it's easy to imagine what that would be like. And the thing that really stands out to me about this song, it's interesting because I was not thinking it was necessarily about suicide, but what I was really struck by was his loneliness. The loneliness of Walter Gray spending time in his basement and going to the library and doing all this research by himself, which you could just say like, oh yeah, being a creator is really lonely. But he's just so in his own experience, in his own head, in his own dreams. And whether, you know, that's depression or just intense fixation, there's like a profound loneliness that struck me about that. And there's also a real loneliness about feeling suicidal. I think that is one of the defining characteristics of feeling suicidal, is feeling so isolated and alone. And something I've been thinking about recently, and then I'll pass it back to you, Scottie, because I know I've been rambling. But one thing that I've been thinking about recently is loneliness. And I think it is so important. And so I would just say it's really important to talk about all the ways like, hey, you're not alone. You might feel alone, but you're not. You're sharing a human experience with other people. Even if you don't have friends, even if you don't have family, you're not alone in your humanity. And I think that is true. And at the same time, the feeling of being alone is just such a real feeling. And I think that is part of being a human. I think loneliness is real. I think we're not alone, but I also think loneliness is so real, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about how, yeah, there are certain aspects of being alive where it's just like, it is just you who's feeling the precise way that you are feeling in this moment, having the precise thoughts that you are feeling, and no one can ever know exactly what your experience is. Okay, that's now I'm done for a second.
No, so a couple quick things. I want to point out that I think this song could be either one, right? It could be a great story about a guy that builds a submarine in his basement, and he goes to Tokyo, Japan, and people talk about how awesome it is that he built his own submarine and went to do that. I also think that it can be a song about suicide, and I think that that's the beauty of music and art, is multiple interpretations, and that it can be both, and that it can be all those things, right? Something you said that really, you know, I had a really good therapist one time say to me, you know, I would talk to her about my suicidal ideations, about what was going on. And she said, I mean, and this is pretty point blank. She said, you know, do you really want to kill yourself, or do you just not want to be wherever wherever you are at that moment?
Yeah.
And I was like, I just don't want to be wherever I am at that moment. And so she's like, you don't want to kill yourself.
Yeah.
You just need to make change, right? And that was a game changer for me, because then I started to view things of, when something made me feel that way, do I just not want to be in that situation for whatever's going on? I just don't want to be there right then. Or if I really don't want to be here, and the majority of the time, 90% of the time, it was like, I don't want to be in this situation.
Yeah.
Very seldom was I really like, I don't want to be here. Now, there is a certain level of, like, when you say that, you know, everybody thinks about suicide, I think that, or thinks about killing themselves. I think that's a pretty safe bet. I think everybody at some point in their life has had some thought about themselves dying and how they would do that, if they would do it themselves, if someone else shot them, or what, you know, like, those are things we think about. I
I
think
think
the big,
so.
but I think the big thing lately that I've been really focusing on is, what do I ruminate on? What am I ruminating on? And I think that whenever I ruminate on, like, things like that, when I'm ruminating, that's when it becomes, like, very negative. That's when it becomes dangerous. That's when it becomes bad. You know what I mean? Like, having thoughts is one thing, ruminating on them and thinking about them. And even on some level, when the song was going on and I was listening to it, I was ruminating. Like, I was kind of just leaning into that idea of, like, this guy dying and death and suicide and things like that, because I wanted to feel, I don't know, I wanted to feel better, or not, maybe not alone. Maybe the point is the song was making me not feel alone. This guy's committing suicide, me too. Maybe that's what I was feeling. You know what I mean? I just wanted, and maybe that's part of what happens with music sometimes, is that, you know, at least for me and maybe for Hannah, you know, or media, we lean into it to feel not alone, because such and such on the TV, Ross and Rachel are not getting along, or, you know, whatever it is on TV, that's how we feel, like, connected. That's why people feel connected to reality TV and movie stars and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, whatever you're focused or ruminating or putting that intention on is what going to be what kind of product you get. So you have to be really careful about where you're putting those intentions. And lucky for me, like, I'm past all this and everything turned out, like, fine. You know what I mean? There wasn't a level that it motivated me to do
Hmm.
something worse. At the same time, that's probably not the case
Your
for a lot of people. So anyways, and so what I realized is that, like, you know, the ruminating is not good. The focus on is not good. The recognizing of those feelings and emotions is good. Recognizing that I'm feeling that way or I'm thinking that way, but then taking the path of rumination versus taking the path of exploring why I'm feeling that way and trying to come to some sort of solution is the big difference. You know what I mean? Like, everybody likes to wallow, and I'm all about, like, wallowing, like, when you need to wallow, but just understand, whatever time you spend wallowing is taking away time from solving. So if you want to wallow for months, that's fine, but now you're months behind of solving that problem, because it's a very hard process to be in the mindset of, like, kind of despair and wallow in depression, and not, like, be able to, like, you know, to just change that and move it into an action. You know what I mean? And so, like, I try to spend as little as time as I can, you know, ruminating and wallowing and being sad, and then going, okay, what can I do today that makes it different for today to move me forward, just like a teeny bit. And usually that makes me feel better. And then it, you know, it becomes a walk instead of a run instead of a walk. And so I think that that's really important to point out.
Whew. I think yeah, of course, there's always a balance. There's a happy medium or whatever. It's weird to say happy medium when we're talking about something so serious, but I think it is a combination of hope, obviously putting yourself in the path of hope and putting yourself in the path of seeing things differently, because when you're deeply depressed, whether you're suicidal or not, the function of depression is to truly, this is like, it's so cruel. This, like, pisses me off that our brains do this. It's so mean. But one of the most, pernicious things about depression is that when you are in it, it truly feels like it will never end.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, it's one of these thought traps that not only are you feeling awful, but your thoughts start to gear around the idea that this is a permanent state and you will always feel like this. Oof. And I know intimately what that feels like.
Me too.
And yeah, I know Scottie does too, based on what he's telling us. So something that does two things, gives you hope, but also validates that while you are incredibly lonely and you feel incredibly lonely, you are not alone in your experience of loneliness, that so many people have also experienced what you are experiencing right now, and they have felt alone. And there's something that to me is incredibly healing about knowing that while I might be lonely, there are other lonely people out there who know what it's like to feel so isolated and so sad. I think the least helpful thing we can do, either as someone who's currently struggling or as someone who is trying to support someone who is struggling, is to invalidate that experience, and to say, just aren't you excited about what comes next? Or like, I like the people who don't get it. This is going to sound snobby, but I think I am a little bit of a snob. If you don't get it, if you haven't been suicidal, like you're probably not going to be a very helpful person unless you are just there to listen and be empathetic and kind. But trying to talk people out of suicide is like, do you know what I'm trying to say? The people who are insensitively talking about how ridiculous it would be to abandon your loved ones and end your own life, I think are doing more harm than good. And it's like people who don't get depression. They're like, I don't get it. Just like pick up and keep going. Which like there are people out there saying that. This is the problem with the modern age, is that like everyone with an opinion is like blasting it around, which, is okay. It's cool, I guess. But when I just hear people talking so insensitively about suicide and depression, it makes me super angry. So if you are struggling, don't listen to those people. They don't know what they're talking about. And if you're not struggling, but you know someone who is, check yourself and check your experience. And if you can relate, then you're probably a good person to support. And if you can't relate, either understand that maybe you're not the best person for them to talk to, or just go forth humbly and be there to listen, as opposed to, invalidate.
Let me wrap up with this, and I think Hannah would agree. I think that anytime you're in a situation where you kind of don't know what to do, always being a good listener like works. Like always shutting your mouth and listening.
Yeah. Do less.
In almost any situation,
Do
if
less.
you don't know what to do. Like do less,
Yes.
listen more, right? And so like,
yeah.
Not everybody, like, I think this is a fair statement to say that, like, I feel like everybody has been in a space where someone gave them an opinion and like they just weren't, like we weren't in a mood for it or ready for that opinion at that time. And then inside they're like, man, I just didn't really need that right now. Take that and amplify it times like 1,000. And that's what a person that is feeling suicidal feels like, is like they feel like, super dismissed,
Yes.
And so, it needs to have even more attention and treated more carefully than your scenario in which someone told you something that you just were like, I'm doing this, I don't want to do this or whatever. It's so much more than that, but it's the same thing. And so you want to treat it with the same care as you would even this minor situation. You'd want to, the minor situation, you'd want to handle it a similar way, And so, I would leave everyone with this, like, just like be a good listener. Like, it really, it's so beneficial. And if you're a good listener, you're going to grow too, because you're going to put new stuff inside your head that doesn't already exist. So if you listen and take in new information, you might think new things about yourself. You might find new perspective about yourself. You might realize that you do have suicidal ideations and you didn't know what that was until somebody told you that's what they were having. You're like, holy shit, I have that too. And so being a good listener always benefits the people around you and benefits yourself. Ding. You know. Um,
Whew.
Well, Hannah, as always, this has been awesome. If anyone has anything that's Mixtape Therapy to you, please let us know in the comments. You can email us. You can text us. I guess if you have our phone, some people send me text messages personally to do songs, and so I have them on a list. But if you have something that's Mixtape Therapy to you, make sure you let us know, and we will see y'all guys next time. See you later.
Bye.